wish I could go back in that bubble and be oblivious to politics, to crime, to everything, but you can't. You can't unring the bell, so.
There's something wrong with this picture, something not right. This shouldn't be the way it is. It's, you know, when those sheriff's helicopters go over your house and the searchlight is in your backyard 3 nights a week, it's time to get out of it. Because we were preparedness minded, because we were preppers, because we were concerned about what happens if, you know, we needed to be prepared to be able to be self-sufficient and sustaining. When we looked at ways that indigenous people who've been off the grid for thousands of years and are still off the grid today, how do they live? Basically, they live on the Neanderthal diet, whatever you can pick off a tree or kill.
Go on, boy. Let's go. Come on, get up here.
Watch this dude there. Oh, good morning. Good morning. Are you hungry? Are you hungry? Let me see your tongue. Open up. Open up. It's okay. Here we go. Oh. Come on. It's okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think he's getting to the point where I want to go out and eat big boy stuff now. Making the dogs food, honey?
Yeah.
If you need the egg basket, you can take it.
Headbutt me. Come on. Come on. Come on. It's time. I'm Rick Austin, also known as the Survivalist Gardener. We've been homesteading for the last 13 years and living off grid. So, out. Wow. Come on, girls. We'd always planned on moving off grid, and we'd always planned on living a sustainable lifestyle. But we kind of sped it up about 10 years. Everything was going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, we were in a really nice gated community, and when the market started falling, you suddenly had people moving up from really pretty undesirable places, and then you suddenly, since the people couldn't make the mortgage payments, they started renting out their homes in this gated community. So we had houses that had 7 cars in the yard, all kinds of crime and issues, and sheriff's helicopters were going over at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and searchlights were going in our backyard, and that was really kind of the end of it for us. And when you are essentially living in a prison of your own making, because you drive in from work, you push the garage door opener, you get in the house, get into the garage, and then close it behind you and make sure nobody snuck in behind you. You turn off the alarm so you can go in the house, turn on the alarm when you get there, and you said, you know, this really isn't any way to live.
I was a city girl, and when I say city girl, I worked in the corporate world, which means rat race in a big city. I was just totally oblivious to life. I mean, my focus was on when the next sale at Macy's was going to be, at Burdine's or Dillard's or any store you want to put in that blank. And But with that comes that naivety. It wasn't until one sunny day at 4:30 in the afternoon, as I was coming down the ramp of a 6th floor parking garage, busy, people all over the sidewalks, coming and going and trying to fight in traffic. I had this really keen sense. Some people say a gut feeling, some people say a hair on the back of your head or neck type of thing. Whatever it was, I got in the car and I locked the door. I don't ever do that because I'm the person that you're sitting behind that I can't reach the little bleeper to put the card in. And so I always left my car door unlocked so I could open the door and reach out to swipe my card. This time I didn't. And I got in the car, I looked behind the seats, I looked down on the floorboard, and I couldn't shake that feeling, but I started driving down. I went through the card swiper fine and pulled out into traffic. Now I had an option of going right or left, and I saw these people running down the sidewalk. And as they got closer, I saw that they were really in a hurry. So just me, nice Nancy, I went ahead and waited so that they could pass in front of me. And what happened next was a shock. Somebody was at my passenger front door and somebody was at the back passenger door with guns, banging on the door and spewing expletives. Yes. Spewing horrible language and telling me that I had better open the doors. And here I am seeing my life literally flash before my eyes because I knew any moment the window was going to break because they were banging the guns on the window. Now, it seems like an eternity, and it always does, but it was within maybe 10, 15 seconds, maybe a minute. I was surrounded by police officers with their guns drawn at me, but it wasn't at me, it was at the bad guy. Well, I'll tell you what, that just took my happy place away instantly. That's when I knew I wasn't in Kansas anymore. That's when I knew there wasn't a happy place anymore. And because of that, I came home. I talked to my husband. We knew that we just could not stay where we were, that we had to make some drastic moves. And so that's what our ultimate decision was, to pack up, sell what we could, sell the car, sell the house, and take what we had and move up and create a homestead. When we decided to move, it was kind of like a retirement homestead, so you kind of get away from everything. Rick is kind of like a born prepper, if you will, survivalist, if you will. He was a Boy Scout. He was, he knew about wilderness and what have you. I knew nothing. I had a cat. He kept on saying, trust me. That's always scary to hear. It's like, oh, yeah. The ideas that he was talking about, the garden ideas that he was talking about was like so foreign to me. I'm a straight row girl. That's all I knew. And he's talking about these trees and circles and what have you. He's talking about water preservation.
Now, I had been doing agricultural stuff sort of as a gentleman farmer for almost my entire adult life. And I started off in New Hampshire where I had apple orchards and, did everything the traditional way, the way that you're told to do. And, I sprayed pesticide every 10 days and after every rain in my apple orchard. My trees were all growing in straight lines this way and straight lines that way. The branches were all touching each other. There was grass growing in between. I used fertilizer and weed killer, and I still had scabby, wormy apples just like every other apple farmer. When I moved to Florida and met this fine lady here, I had citrus grows as well and dabbled in that, and same situation. Straight rows going this way, straight rows going that way. All the trees had their branches touching. And so it was kind of a monoculture system, so was the apple orchard. All you had was apple trees. All you had was fruit trees, whether that, citrus, whether that was orange or whatever else you were growing there, lemons and that sort of thing. and used pesticide, weed killer, fertilizer, and still had issues with bugs, and the bugs got more tolerant of all these pesticides, so you had to use more and more and more, and knew that was going into our food, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. So I started studying various different types of agriculture, and because we had ultimately planned on living off-grid and being self-sufficient, I started looking at what native peoples throughout the world had done and what indigenous peoples were still doing today, and found out that these people did not plant trees, did not plant fruits, did not plant vegetables. They basically lived on what I call the Neanderthal diet. Whatever they could kill and whatever they could pick off a tree. They didn't water, they didn't weed, they didn't fertilize, and they did just fine. And I said, that's the kind of way that we ought to be growing things. This is the way nature has been growing things for millions of years, without man's help, without chemicals. So I looked more and more into ways to be able to grow food that way. We're inside the Secret Garden of Survival, and this is our camouflage food forest, and we say it's a camouflage food forest because you really wouldn't know what it was even when you're inside here. I've been on film before, and the guy said, well, where's your garden? And I said, you're in it. So this is really kind of the permaculture food concept. I really don't like the term permaculture now because it's become so bastardized. There's so many people using it as a marketing term. So I call what we do nature culture because it's the way nature's grown things for millions of years without any help from man. This is a moonglow pear. These are elderberries right here. And they're just flowering right now. This whole concept is kind of little mini ecosystems. We've got herbs everywhere in the garden, and the neat thing about herbs is you've got little florets right there that are constantly flowering, and things like our honeybees. They'll pollinate all of our fruit, and then the bees produce honey for me, and the predator wasps and that sort of thing come in here, so they kind of protect the other fruit from bad bugs that you don't want to have. This is feverfew, which is essentially aspirin. So in a grid down situation, we've got painkiller right here, and then this is flowering right now and going to seed. This is a jujube tree, and jujubes produce a small little round fruit that tastes like an apple. If you look at what happens in nature, typically you'll have a fruit tree or a nut tree, and that will grow up, and eventually it will grow up higher and it will spread out. Now you have a canopy underneath that, a canopy of shade. And there are certain types of plants that enjoy that shade, and there's a symbiotic relationship between the plants in the shade and the fruit tree or nut tree. And then this is lemon balm. So we've got herbs here underneath the trees and around the trees. This right here is rosehip. If you create the right types of plants and infrastructure, then everything does well by itself without me interfering with it. This is a nice little symbiotic relationship right here. This is a tomato that hasn't got any tomatoes on it yet, but it will. And we planted that here with catnip. And if you plant tomatoes next to catnip, tomato hornworms won't go near it. So anybody that's grown tomatoes before knows that their nemesis is the tomato hornworm. This whole concept is kind of little mini ecosystems. So you start with a fruit tree, you start with a nut tree, and then you have plants underneath that enjoy the shade, and there's a symbiotic relationship there. Outside of that, you've got full sun again. That's where your berry bushes, your shrubs go, that sort of thing. So things like blueberries, blackberries, elderberries go outside that layer because they're in full sun. Then outside of that layer, you've got an herb layer. So that's your cooking herbs, your medicinal herbs, which are flowering all the time. They've got many little flowers all over them. And that attracts the pollinators for your fruit, your berries, your nuts, and it attracts the good bugs that will kill the bad bugs that you don't want to have on your fruit tree. This mountain mint is a great plant to have. It's got more camphor than anything else has in it, so you can actually save these leaves and you can dry them out, and in the wintertime you can use them as a nasal spray to clear out your nose. They're very, very aromatic. This brings in wasps and pollinators. And the other great thing about this is it's a great plant for honeybees, because there's actually an oil on this plant that the bees get on their legs, and they bring it back with them to the hive, and then they share that with the other bees, and it actually knocks the varroa mite off the bees. Those ecosystems are self-sufficient. They're set up in such a way that you don't need to use pesticide, you don't need to use weed killer, don't need to use fertilizer, because nature's doing all of that the way it has for millions of years without man's help. Those are Nanking cherries right here in front of us. They've already been harvested, and then right behind that, the taller trees are actually hazelnuts. And then down below we've got we've got black raspberries down below. And then this behind it is a kefir pear. Last year we got 50 gallons of pears off of this one tree. And we've got 4 trees. So we had a substantial harvest of kefir pears. And then underneath this you can see we've got a blueberry that is not ripe at this point, but it will be, even though they're in shade, because everything just kind of grows together. They will ripen and turn deep blue when they're ripe. The beauty of this whole system too is that because we have different types of fruit that are ripening at different times, it makes it a lot easier for me to pick and for her to can, because if everything in that garden came due at the same time, there would be no way we could manage that much production. And then here we have blackberries, and these guys are just about ready. Well, these guys are ready to pick. The dark ones are. And we'll make preserves or some kind of sauce out of those that we can use in our goat milk ice cream. This is a peach tree that we've already harvested. This is another Nanking cherry. Another hazelnut. Got a blueberry in there. And there's an apple tree behind it. And then there's another blueberry right here. And then the tall thing right above it is a mulberry. This is a pawpaw, which is native to this region, but it actually tastes like a banana on the fruit. And it's a weird fruit because, when they're being pollinated, they kind of smell like poop, the flowers, and actually houseflies pollinate the pawpaws as opposed to the honeybees. This is sassafras, so you can make root beer out of this stuff right here. Rosemary. That's a good deer deterrent because they don't like the smell of rosemary, so the deer will actually walk away from an area that has rosemary in it. I had a friend that had a nursery, a plant nursery, and he had 2 sides that had fence on it where the humans would go and interact with the nursery, and then around the back it was all open, and there was actually a deer trail around it, but he had rosemary planted all the way around, and the deer just avoided it completely. They had all kinds of great plants the deer would normally want to eat. And then this is a wine sap apple tree. There's green apples on it right now. They'll ripen up and they'll be kind of a reddish green color when they're ripe. There's a high bush cranberry. I've had people up here from agriculture departments and from the cooperative extension, and just like, how are you producing all this fruit on such a small space, and you're not using pesticide, and you're not using weed killer or fertilizer? And here we've got blackberries again, and then that's growing in with Concord grapes. Those aren't ripe yet, but when they're ripe, they'll be deep purple, and they grow in bunches. as opposed to the muscadines and the scuppernongs, which are actually native to the area, and they grow in singular or double units, not bunches like that. I like the Concord grapes, but they are much more susceptible to pests in this region. We've got a quarter of an acre, maybe a little bit more, of fruit trees, berry bushes, vineyard, orchard. I mean, it's all of that stuff all combined into one area. And the beauty of it is that, nature does what nature does. There is really no maintenance whatsoever because if you get the infrastructure in place right, everything kind of takes care of itself. We eat really, really well, and better than we ever have in our lifetimes. And anytime somebody comes here and samples the blueberry coulis that she puts on top of her homemade cheesecake from our goats, it's like they're tasting food for the first time. Since we're trying to maximize our solar exposure, one of the things I did with the garden was make sure it was on the south side so that you're getting the most sun during the day, so you have the maximum length of growing season. Your plants have a chance to grow much more and faster if they're on the south side than they are on the north side. So I took that same concept with the greenhouse, wanted to be able to make sure that we were growing as much food as we could in there and not have to use supplemental heat in there. So when I built the greenhouse, I have a maximum amount of glazing, which is glass essentially, on the windows here, and also a roof that has glazing as well. And that allows the sun to come in. In the wintertime, the sun is lower in the sky, so it comes in the windows on the side. In the summertime, the sun is up higher, so it comes in the windows on the roof. That allows us to have plants growing in there year-round, and so we're growing all kinds of things in there. And that's kind of her project to do the plants in there, but we've got herbs growing there year-round. We've got peppers and vegetables and that sort of thing growing in there.
Well, this is our greenhouse, and what we try to do in here is try to duplicate what we have out there as far as herbs. That means oregano, or all the mint, basil, like I said, all the herbs, because we use those for medicinal purposes also. But because of the fact that these are annuals as far as the vegetables that we put in here, we try to have a duplicate of the vegetables in here also during the growing season, because we found out, like the tomatoes over here, you can let them grow. In a tropical situation, tomatoes will continue to grow. So if you just let them go, I prune off the old things so that the energy isn't going into something that doesn't need to be. We also have avocado trees. We have lemon trees. We have, as you can see, these are our coffee trees. We save the coffee beans for a new generation of trees, which we have all back here. These are probably 3 years. This guy's probably, I'm almost saying he's about 8 or 9 years old right now. As you can see, I used to have them sitting up on the ledges there, but we've had to put them down. I'm not quite sure what we're gonna do, maybe pitch the roof or something like that. We feed this to the bunnies. It's kind of bitter for us, but this is called Okinawa spinach. So we try to use foods here in the greenhouse also to feed the livestock as well as us. This is called soapwort. This is actually a laundry soap leaf that suds up to help if in fact the situation comes where we don't have any laundry detergent. We can use the soapwort. That's what Rick and I try to do here, is if I couldn't have this, what do I do about it? I am so far away from any drugstores, grocery stores, shopping malls. Shopping malls are out, they've been out for a long time. So how can I make things? So when everybody was panicking about the hand sanitizer, the toilet paper, all of these issues, I really didn't have to worry about it, because a lot of the things that we need, you're able to make it. This is something that I use a lot, because as you can see, you're going to probably see Jane, the leaves look pretty nasty or pretty gnarly. And yes, they do. I've got a little moth going here. I make what's called slug pubs. And what this is beer. This is non-alcoholic. They're not really, they don't prefer as far as one over the other, but we just buy non-alcoholic because what they like is yeast, the slugs. So I put a little hole on either side, put it down ground level, and every couple, 2 or 3 days or so, bear with me here so I don't spill it all over, you get nasty, nasty big slugs. I don't know if you can see the nastiness in there. Let me get some more, because I've got them all the way down here, which this eliminates them totally eating the leaves all up. Let's see, I check them, like I said, every 2 or 3 days. Then I'll replenish them. And what I do then, let's do this, nastiness. See those nasty things? That's what eats my leaves up. Then what I'll do is I will pour the liquid out, replenish it, and I feed these slugs to the ducks. So again, it's just this big vicious cycle of trying to take care of the whole farm with everything and anything that we have, because you have good bugs and you have bad bugs. Slugs to us are the bad ones, but they're good in that we can feed the ducks too. And I seed my own. I went to a plant nursery and bought the containers so that I can reseed. So I have all my seeding things here that I save throughout the years, including spider webs. And this is what I start in the wintertime, right? As it's getting cool, I start my seeds, and I start with the small little ones, then I'll take them out, then I'll put them into maybe a larger container like this, and after that they go into this and this. So it's a graduation until I can actually put them either in here, the greenhouse, or out in the gardens themselves.
If you're really focused on heat and you're trying to save yourself as much as possible, then you try to get as much as you can from the sun. When I was at Lowe's one day and I was looking at some black water piping that comes in these 100-foot coils, it was outside in the sun, and when I went to pick it up, it literally burned my hand. And a light bulb went off, and I realized that, wait a minute, that's really hot. If I was to put coils of black pipe near the ceiling of my greenhouse and I ran cold water through it, then that would heat that water and I could use that water in the house. So in my greenhouse, I've got 8 100-foot coils. I didn't even take the tape off them that was on there before. I hung them in the ceiling so the sun beats down on those, heats those up. I have cold water going in one side, and then each of those coils, the water's going through the coils and then through the next one, because they're all connected in series. So by the time it gets through 800 feet of hot coil, that water is hot. And that's how we heat our hot water year round. And we get 140 degree heated water all for free without having to have a water heater. And so we use the water for various purposes, and primarily what is called gray water is everything but toilet water. And that's the water used in the sink, the kitchen sink, the lavatory, the shower. And I've got a system that can take that wastewater and divert it either into the greenhouse to water my plants in the greenhouse, or I can divert it back out to the garden, and it goes into basically a little man-made wetland and gets filtered out there, and then goes through 3 little trickle ponds and into a pond that we literally carved out of the side of the mountain that we're on here. And that goes in there, and we've got that stocked with fish, and that's our little duck pond, so the ducks can play in there and splash around in there, and also drink all day long from there. Again, trying to be as efficient as possible. I looked at where the most wasted water went, and I realized that the typical toilet system that we have in America, you're flushing 9,000 gallons of water, of good drinkable water, down the toilet per person per year. So between two of us, that's 18,000 gallons of water that I have to pay to pump out of a well and to run in there just to move poop. And we started looking into a compost toilet. So we've got a toilet in our bathroom that basically connects to a pipe that goes outside the building into a composter, and that compost over time will break down and you can actually use that out in the garden or wherever we want to grow more crops in the future. When most people think about homesteading, they think about the livestock they're going to have, and they say, I'm going to get me some chickens and a cow. And I really looked at this whole thing and said, you know, I hate chickens, and there's really not a lot of reason to have chickens. You know, there's certainly very little reason to have cows. And if you're trying to be sustainable and you're trying to maximize your return on a minimum investment, your typical cow is going to take 2 to 5 acres of cleared pasture, or you're going to have to bring that cow 40 pounds of feed a day. That to me just didn't seem like an efficient way to produce milk, and I've always been a big milk drinker and like the milk and dairy products and cheeses and yogurts and everything else. And when we looked at what we were going to do, we said, you know, well, let's think about goats. So every day I take the goats out in the woods and let them feed themselves, and this saves us a tremendous amount of time, money, and energy on trying to feed them in a non-sustainable way. So they'll come out here and eat every day for about half an hour and get their fill of all the roughage that they need, and that means I don't have to bring in hay or alfalfa or anything else. And they also know what they need from a nutrient standpoint, and you know, they'll eat what they think they need to eat, and next day they'll eat something different. So I don't have to get involved, and I can do it as naturally as possible for them to be able to eat and produce milk for us.
Well, the only reason we were going to have goats was for dairy. So we decided that, well, let's see if we can taste the goat milk first. So we went to the grocery store like everybody does, I guess, and they had a container of goat's milk, so we brought it home all excited. It's nasty. I mean, I can't even, it's nasty. It's got like a wild taste or something. It was just like, and we were so disheartened because that's what we were planning on for our dairy. Well, as luck would have it, I guess, there was, we found out that they were going to have this goat competition thing or a fair or whatever. Like I said, it was all foreign to me, but we decided to go, and they had all these different types of goats in, well, they were cute. They were like little goats, and I mean, they weren't really big, so I wasn't intimidated by them. We went to this little booth, and they said, would you like to taste some? And it's like, ugh, no, I've already tasted. And he was like, no, you don't understand. This is raw goat milk. This is not pasteurized like you'll find in the grocery store. He had it nice and cold in a container, and we tasted it, and it was like, well, this doesn't taste bad at all. In fact, it tastes really good. That's kind of how we opened our eyes to the Nigerian dwarfs. They were small enough that I could handle them. The milking was a lot easier. They just seemed like they had a great temperament. So that was kind of how we ended up with the dairy goats.
3 of those girls that are making milk at any one time will produce 1.5 gallons of milk a day for us. I mean, we can't drink that much milk, 1.5 gallons a day, so she turns that into cheese, into yogurt, into the best ice cream in the world. Goat's milk actually has 50% more butterfat than cow's milk does, and butterfat is good for you. And if you are lactose intolerant to cow's milk, you will not be to goat's milk, because goat milk has smaller fat globulates, which is why goat's milk does not separate like cow's milk does. So we've got Champagne d'Argent rabbits. Champagne d'Argent, gotta kind of say that with your nose in the air, but they're basically a French silver rabbit. They grow to be 12 pounds, and they dress out at 10 pounds. And if you know anything about rabbits, it's the leanest meat out there, highest meat to bone ratio. So they produce an awful lot of meat, and 3 does and 1 buck will produce 90 full-grown rabbits in a year. And so if you do the math, they dress out at 10 pounds, you get 90 babies that grow to full size. That's 900 pounds of meat in the space of this little area right here. Since I was a business guy for years and years and years, I tried to get the most out for the least amount put in. So our number 1 source of protein is rabbits. You can make rabbit really any way you want to, and she makes rabbit cordon bleu and chicken fried rabbit and baked rabbit and rabbit fingers, and anything that you would do with chicken or something like that, you can do with that. Just in contrast, chickens take 5.5 months to get to full maturity, so you are feeding them that entire time. And you're, we've got some pretty big birds here for chickens. We've got Rhode Island Reds, and the roosters will get to be 8.5 pounds. So compare that, 5.5 months to get to full maturity at 8.5 pounds per rooster versus a rabbit that's 2 months to get to maturity and it's 12 pounds. I mean, the math just makes much more sense. Plus, with the chickens, there's a lot more fat content. The meat's not quite as good, not as high in protein. And we've got ducks, which go through the garden, and there's a symbiotic relationship that they create. If you put chickens in a garden, they'll scratch up all the roots and destroy it, and before you know it, it will be a desert, and nothing will be growing there. And I've got plenty of examples of that where we keep chickens. The ducks, on the other hand, I can let them out in my Secret Garden of Survival, in my little permaculture food forest, and they'll go through and they will eat the bugs and slugs and snails that I don't want in the rest of my plants. So they're kind of a natural insecticide, and then they fertilize behind them, and they turn those bugs and slugs and snails into protein for me. We've got Khaki Campbell ducks. The reason we have Khaki Campbells is they are the most prolific egg-laying fowl in the world. They produce 300 eggs per duck per year. Those eggs are about 1.5 to 2 times the size of a chicken egg, of a grade A extra large chicken egg. So not only are they producing more eggs, but their eggs have a lot more protein in them. So they taste relatively the same as a chicken egg, so there's really not a lot of difference there. And we've got those ducks to produce eggs for us. We've got honeybees, and we've got that for honey. Honey is nature's perfect food. It's got all kinds of medicinal properties, just absolutely amazing. So we use that as a sweetener, and we also use that as a preservative. And basically, I kind of look at myself as a landlord, and I provide the bees with a place to stay. And 2 times a year, I go out and collect the rent. And I give them enough to get through the winter, and they basically give me the excess. We have done a lot with traditional Langstroth hives, which are, you know, if you got a box on top of a box on top of a box, and you've got your basic boxes where the bees are making more baby bees, and then they're storing their honey in the upper boxes. Those boxes can be 60 to 80 pounds to be able to lift off, and by the time you get them stacked up high enough, it's really hard to see what's going on in the hive itself. So we have, I've been studying for a couple of years a totally different system, and this is what we've got now are they're horizontal Langstroth hives. These are horizontal Langstroth hives. They're non-traditional. They're more like the bees are in nature. It's a much thicker wood than most of the traditional hives, so it keeps them more insulated in the summertime and in the winter time. The beauty of this whole system, as opposed to your traditional Langstroth hives, is you don't have to take boxes off and break up their house in order to get in there and see what's going on. If somebody came in and took 1 or 2 stories off of my house, I'd be pretty upset. So to open it and see what's going on in there, all you have to do is open these boards. This is a relatively new hive, but they're filling these up, and these are all large frames. You can only extract 3 at a time, but it just gives them more room to work. And if I get ones that are filled with honey, I just basically take 1 frame out, or, you know, several frames out, and that is much less obtrusive to the bees, so they are much calmer than what you would normally see in a regular Langstroth hive. And we have those as well, and there's space to grow too. These are empty right here, so this is really a great system. The bees are happier, I'm happier, I'm getting older, I don't have to pick up 80-pound boxes of honey to extract it anymore. So that's another innovative thing that we're doing here that is kind of outside of the box in terms of how we're taking care of our animals. Our latest venture is a rather large animal. So this is our little pig area as part of our hog operation. These are a heritage endangered breed called red wattles, and they're called red wattles because they're red and they've got these ugly little wattles along the side there. That's just a trait of the breed. It has no purpose that anybody knows about, but they grow fast. They can be in just about any terrain, which is different than a lot of other pigs. They don't need a lot of care. They don't need any drugs whatsoever. You can raise them on pasture. We raise them in the woods as well. They do just fine rooting up stuff and finding food, and as much as possible we let them forage for themselves. These paddocks beyond here have wheat and oats in them, and that wheat and oat has already gone to seed. And since pigs are a root animal, turnips are a great feed for them, because the seed is relatively cheap compared to having to buy other feed for them. And by the time these little pigs are done going through those paddocks, we'll be moving them into here. And these are all turnips right here, and they'll be pretty big size by the time we move them out. Right now these are just small little things, but in a month or so they'll be big. And you can see they were in this paddock first. We opened that up, and then they pretty much mowed down the second paddock over there. And they're going to go through a series of paddocks, and then across the street through paddocks, and by October, November, they should be 350 pounds or so. And then we'll process them for for meat. But that was the whole plan. Is we got 2 girls and 1 boy as breeders, and they'll continue to produce babies for us, and we'll sell off the excess. But right now we have them inside this enclosure because they're still small enough that they can't really defend themselves against some of the bigger predators that we have around here. So these little guys were born here, and actually in that farrowing hut right there. So this is a farrowing hut that the mother birthed the babies in, and it's designed so she can't roll over on the pigs with that bar back there. We just threw some hay in there, and she had her babies and raised them up until they were weaned, and then we took the mom away from the babies, and now she's back with the boar and the other sow out in the woods. So they've used this hut after the mom birthed them, and this is their shelter for now until they get a little bit bigger. And the metal silver roof reflects the light and the heat, so they're not too hot. Plus there's ventilation going out the sides, and so they stay relatively cool. We haven't spent a lot of time with them like we did with the first set of pigs, because the first set of pigs we were keeping, and we knew they would be growing up to be big pigs, and we wanted to make sure they weren't aggressive. But that is another trait for this breed, is that they're good moms. They're not aggressive. You know, they're very lean. They're like one of the restaurant's favorite porks. They command a premium price because they're such a lean meat. Some people say it's closer to steak than it is to pork, but you know, we're raising pork to be sustainable, and just like everything else that we do, it just took a while before we got into the whole pig business, because it requires multiple people to be able to process them and do that kind of stuff. So, and sometimes some heavy equipment too. I mean, when you're talking about a 350-pound pig that you've got to scrape and lift up, you know, you need some equipment to be able to do that, and scald them and bring them back out and put them on a table and scrape them and scald them and put them back out. So that's a lot of work. And for 2 people like Jane and myself, that wasn't enough. So we have partners in the hog venture, and so they're going to participate in the meat side of things too. So they help pay for and work to create the infrastructure for the pigs. And you know, this year, the first year was just getting everything set up and having them have babies, and now, you know, we're on our way toward processing our meat. You know, as we grow and as we expand and as our livestock gets more and more, we've got 90 animals now. They're all small and they're all sustainable, but you know, as they have babies and as we get more chickens or more ducks or whatever, you got to build more space for them. So we had an old truck topper that I turned into a chicken truck. So as opposed to a chicken tractor, it actually looks like the body of a truck, because that's what we used. We used that as the top of it, and that's worked out extremely well.
So you take a flat shovel and just take it out, and you're good to go. Just scoop it and go.
And I've done a lot of other innovative things in terms of our duck enclosure, and in terms of how we take care of our animals and the barns that they're in.
Just have metal door on this thing, and they smashed through it, so I had to build this wooden door to be able to keep them in at night. All right, boys. Take it easy. All right, you're okay. You know, somebody doesn't get to eat if they both are eating out of the same trough, and you know, they just wallop on each other in an enclosed and confined space. So we just had to separate them.
Yeah.
Nice.
Left shoulder to right hip. Good.
We were on the speaking circuit, and what we realized in the speaking circuit is that people wanted to learn. You know, they were there because they wanted to learn, and also, you know, if they were looking for products that would help them be more prepared, they wanted to know information from the people that were selling it. And unfortunately, most of these things that were done in convention centers, the people running them weren't preparedness-minded people. They weren't homesteaders. They were just promoters that were trying to make a buck on the latest craze out there. We got together with a couple of other speakers and said, you know, we want to produce an event that we would like to attend in an environment where you can try to practice the skills that you learn in terms of bushcraft and starting fires and cooking over a campfire and using a Dutch oven and, you know, that sort of stuff. And so we created Prepper Camp. Every year we try to have new things for people to see and new things for people to learn. And some of it's topical based on what's going on in the world right now and even politically. But we have some basic skills that you need for survival and homesteading that we have every year, and then we also have new classes each year. And we get new classes by some of the same instructors and new classes by totally new instructors.
They always bump it up and ramp it up for the people here so that those who want to come repeatedly year after year aren't hearing the same canned speech.
Every year I look for at least 20 new classes out of the 64 that we teach every single day at Prepper Camp over the 3 days.
My favorite part of the weekend is networking with the people that come in here and associating with like-minded individuals. I'm a Christian, I am a prepper, which everybody is around here, and in those two things we all have that in common, so I can come in here and talk with folks without worrying about being politically correct.
This is a heater, it's an air conditioner. You can cook with it, boil water with it. That's all you do. Pour a bottle, now look at that can. I might not have let it get hot.
It's not as hot as it should be.
Alrighty, this is a sun oven. It folds up, it carries like a suitcase. It only weighs 23 pounds. Setting it up takes a matter of seconds. It's got a simple one-piece construction. You open the door, your food goes in here, and then it has a rack inside that will keep your food from spilling if you move it to follow the sun. And it has a leg built into the back that allows you to raise or lower it to meet the sun wherever it is in the horizon. If you put a chicken in a pot and you put it in the sun oven, you'd be able to cook a 3-pound chicken in a preheated sun oven in about an hour and a half, as long as you move it every 30 minutes to follow the sun. Or you could take a frozen chicken, put it in here in the morning, set the oven facing south, leave for the day, come back at supper and have a cooked roast.
Prepper is a word that's used very loosely. People who are preppers usually don't prefer to be called preppers. The idea for a seasoned prepper is sustainability. Sustainability is your goal. Once you're there, then you are a genuine prepper. Something's going to happen. There's no way around it. Prepper involves being ready for that moment. And if you're ready for that moment, survivability goes up astronomically.
Having that preparedness mindset, which is not that doom and gloom and booger man thing, it's learning how to be self-sufficient, it's learning how to be self-reliant, it's actually using what you have. Being in a worldwide pandemic, we were able just to sit out in the yard and just relax and look at the animals, look at the nature, look at the sky and everything else and say, you know what? We're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic and we haven't missed a beat. We don't have to go off of the mountain if we don't want to. We don't have to leave. from somebody like the majority of the people out there, they're kind of oblivious to how all this could work. They're thinking that you have to have so much money to be able to build and have all these things, when we're actually showing we didn't have any money and we were able to create this. We had to learn how to be sustainable up here. We only had what was left of my 401k and what was left from the things that we were able to sell. And that's not a lot of money.
You know, we learned a lot and have had to adapt and do things differently and change things from what we originally thought, and you know, what was conventional wisdom. And if anything here we've learned is that, and what people want to learn from us, is how to do things in a way that works, that may not be conventional. And we kind of think out of the box. You know, they used to say that farmers were the original engineers. They had to figure out how to do stuff with nothing, or with old parts or stuff that they have laying around. And we've done a lot of that, really out of necessity more than anything else.
Built this thing from the ground up out of nothing. No flight plan, no manual to be found. You and I, we're driving in the dark without headlights, trying to find our way. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. I'll be here with you. Built a wall around my heart to stop the bleeding. More than made of all the words that I should have said to you. And we're walking through the fire and the smoke clouds, trying to find our way. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. I'll be here with you. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I'll be there with you. It's hard telling where we'll be in the coming days, but I will be there with you. I'll be here with you.
Say God. Dear God, say God, thank you for the day. Thank you for our cheese. Thank you for our meat. Thank you for the eggs that we like to eat. Thank you for the ducks. And thank you for all the animals. And thank you, God, for, I can't think of a rhyme. What? In Jesus' name, Sega. In Jesus' name. Amen. Good girls. Good girls. Okay, Sega. Come on. Good girls.